This is the Lambda Cartel, episode 11. With me is John Best, and I'm your host, Pablo Rivera. John grew up in Northeast Ohio. He is fascinated by tech, and he started programming at age 14. I would say that you started writing bugs at age 14. And he wants to learn what he doesn't know. I think in that regard, John and I have a lot in common. And I want to say John has been one of the earliest Lambda Cartel supporters. That's why I wanted him to be the first person to be interviewed, in this podcast. We've usually just had people, other members from the Lambda Cartel just talk. But today, this is all about John and learning about his journey. So, John, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty psyched. I'm pretty pumped to be here talking with you and to be able to get to this point on our journey to say that we're past the 2-month milestone, which for me is 2 months more than we would have normally we were expected to last. So always a new day is awesome. So John, you started coding programming at age 14.
Yeah.
Tell me about your journey.
Yeah. So a little bit of preamble. I got my first computer when I was about 7 years old, and that would have been about mid 1997.
Wow.
So I fell in love with the whole kind of Windows 95 and, oh my goodness, look what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since I just was always hungry for knowledge in general, and I got really good at sort of knowing how to fix things. And when I was 12, I started, learning how to do it professionally, like being a professional technician. So I was pretty good at it for being, 12.
But wait, let me stop you right there, because
yeah.
I know people who are way older than us, or even younger, whatever, right? I know people of different ages, and they're just terrible at computers, because some people just don't really have the skill set, but others don't really care about them. So at age 12, I guess that's a really great age to be tinkering with computers. So
yeah,
I'd say that you were your best, and this is not a pun based on your last name. You were your best at 12 years old. I personally say that I peaked at around 13 when it came to my tech abilities. So
yeah.
So you actually work with hardware. You dealt general IT problems.
Yep.
Wow.
And and one of the book series I got was upgrading and repairing PCs.
Oh, and I know that one. The hardcover.
Yep.
Like burgundy and cream color.
Yep.
It's like 1,000 pages.
Yep. Each edition is like 1,500 pages, but it's like
I still have it.
Yep.
I actually still have it. It's like from 99, 2000.
Yeah.
Holy wow.
Yeah, I still have digital PDFs of my first edition that I ever had.
Wow,
and
that's amazing.
I buy a new edition every year just to,
That's amazing. The fact that we have a lot in common. You're a little younger than me. That's the only problem I see.
Yeah, I mean, nobody likes
at age
27, I guess.
It's one of those ages where you're not old enough to be considered, old, but you're not young enough to be considered hip. So, you're like the ham of the sandwich. Either be bread or be cheese, but don't be ham. So, I also started at age 7. I had a Commodore 64, so I really didn't have an operating system, right? I just had BASIC.
Yeah.
And I had the big Commodore manual.
Yep. I had one when I was 10, so.
You had a C64 when you were 10?
Yep.
Wow. I mean, we're literally best friends right now.
And I had the original CRT, I had the original disk drive, I had the original everything.
Wow. Wow, the 1541 and
Yep.
all the magic noises that it made.
Yep.
You know, one of these days I'm gonna buy one and I'm just going to, put a menudo in the background, which is what you would hear in the Puerto Rican, homes back in the 80s, and I would just rock out with my 664. Wow. So you are a .NET developer.
Yes.
And, and I used to cringe anytime I say those words because I used to have a big prejudice or prejudice or
Right.
my English is not very good looking, so I apologize for that. Yeah. So I used to be very I thought that .NET developers, it's not that they were below me, but that they had given up on technology because they were doing Microsoft tech. But .NET is now on a period where it's just morphing into something worth spending or investing your time into. And I'm actually investing time with .NET Core and F#, all those things. Now,
Yeah.
as someone who has a .NET background, like, how do you see this playing out? How do you see this approach to open source? Do you see Microsoft, this Microsoft intent to sort of captivate the market? How do you see that playing out?
I really think it's I really think .NET is having a huge renaissance right now, and
That's
.NET
true.
is expanding in ways that we could have never imagined, even 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ecosystem keeps getting better and better and better. And
That's true. That's true. It actually looks to me like .NET is one of these. It's an open source language. I know .NET is a framework, but that
Right.
at least F#, from my point of view, I don't know C#, but F# at least looks like it's an open source language,
Right.
and that is pretty exciting and surprising.
Yeah. And I think what differentiates .NET from something like Java is obviously, not just technical differences, but the entire way that the entire way that the project is managed and the project is shepherded are completely different. Because, you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about Microsoft going off on a tangent and you know completely stomping on what people want.
Yeah, yeah,
And
true. That's true.
and I know with Java, and especially I know with Java, especially with Sun, and then once they were bought by Oracle, that became more and more of a concern as time went on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
even you look now, I mean, people are worried about Java as an ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
because of how certain things are being handled. I mean, there was a
That's
big like rebellion about what is it, adding modules or adding some bit to the language, and there was a
yeah.
there was a big rebellion in terms of uh, finalizing the specification for that, and you would never see that in a you would never imagine seeing that in anything .NET related, because Microsoft, I mean, for all of, you can say whatever else you want about Microsoft, but because they built .NET for developers, they've taken great care to be good stewards of .NET as an ecosystem and not just as a way to sell more Visual Studio licenses.
Mm-hmm. No,
You
that's
know.
true. That's a really great point. My big issue with Java, and you're gonna notice that I have issues with all of the enterprise, what are called enterprise languages. I have issues with them because there are religions formed
Yeah.
around them, and Java within the Java religion, there's like 5,000 sects,
Right.
and you don't really know what's happening if
Yeah.
you're not within a specific echo chamber, which let me tell you, they're all echo chambers.
Right.
If you're not within that specific module, let's say, you're really not going to care about anything else here. You're not going to get a good grasp of everything.
Right.
Microsoft with .NET has definitely done a better job, and this is where Microsoft shines. Microsoft has always been a copycat, and
Yeah.
that's the truth. This is not me criticizing them. They see
Right.
something that works, they iterate on it, and they improve it.
Yeah.
And .NET is a great example of them iterating on that enterprise framework that they had and say, okay, enterprise is dead as we know it. Let's go with the model that killed it, which is open source.
Yeah. And what a great coup that Microsoft pulled off back in, what was it, 98, 98, 99, to get Anders Heilsberg away from Borland.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
and
It has a very colored history, and Microsoft being Microsoft, they will not quit. Microsoft is like a tsunami.
yeah.
They will just come
Hello?
and will take that market, like what they're doing with Azure. They
Yeah.
are oh my god, I thought that Azure was this old complicated piece of garbage because it used to be like that
Right.
back when I tried it, and now I'm like, wow, this
Right.
is pretty nice.
Yeah.
And so as a C sharp, you say that you told me that you are mostly professionally, you're a C sharp developer, right?
Yeah.
So where do you see C sharp playing out in this whole scenario, or in Microsoft agenda? How do you see moving toward? And let me ask, like a following question: given the existence of F sharp, do you see them, or how do you see them playing out? How do you see them like birthing another language, or do you see them like crossing over? Like, what do you see there?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Um,
Are you surprised?
no, no, I think it's a very intelligent question, but
Well, it didn't come from me. I took it from Twitter. No, I'm just kidding. Just go ahead.
yeah. Well, I think C sharp will, C sharp has always been really great at evolving well, you know,
hmm
and adding things like, lambdas and generics and link and all of these kinds of things, you know, and they've always been really good at keeping up as a language to add new features and make sure those features are well represented within .NET as an ecosystem. And I have every bit of confidence that that will continue to be the case. I think because C sharp and F sharp, I think they will both continue to evolve, and because they are both, .NET languages that run on the CLR, I think that
hmm
both of them will have full freedom to continue to evolve independently and still be able to interoperate with each other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just curious. I personally don't enjoy getting my hands dirty with C sharp
Uh-huh.
because it follows the Java meme of writing OOP code
Right.
just because, classes upon classes. I mean, it has
Right.
more classes than a school,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I find that really annoying. And everything is an object. And
Yeah.
unless you learn the APIs well, there's no way that you're gonna get around, uh,
Right.
and write some code. And I've been doing Python for a couple of years now, amongst other languages, and I come to realize that Python takes a lazy approach, and
Yeah.
it's not the best approach, but it's the
Right.
lazy approach where, with little, you can do a lot.
Right.
Whereas here, you are expected to know a lot in order to do a little.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's something that actually turns me off about F sharp too. But F sharp is a little more, I guess, interesting,
Yeah.
given that it's functional and it's an ML, based
Yeah.
language and all that. So C sharp, it will continue being object oriented.
Yeah.
And it might get a little bit more functional or flavor, I guess.
Yeah. And I have every expectation that it will, because they've been surprisingly good at importing good functional ideas and making them work,
Mm-hmm.
and making them integrate well without it seeming slapped on.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Look, with C sharp, what was it, 3.0, when Link was when Link was first added, they integrated that with the rest of the ecosystem really well.
That's true.
You
That's
know,
true. It felt like when you buy a car, it felt like one of those options
yeah,
that normally you wouldn't get,
yeah,
but it's right there. You can use it.
right,
So you mentioned before we started toying with Haskell,
yes,
and I told you that I personally don't enjoy Haskell that much
yeah,
because it doesn't really fit my thinker style right now. And
right,
that's not a comment on Haskell. That's a comment on me, right?
right.
That's where I am right now. So what calls you about Haskell? What attracts you to it?
Well, I think it's a completely different way of thinking about programming that most people would never even think existed. And it's, once, even if you never actually use Haskell itself all that much, the lessons that you can learn about programming itself from knowing about how Haskell does things is, in my opinion, very important.
Hmm.
So that was what drove me to Haskell into kind of what we call pure functional languages.
So you would say that um, your insistence on learning new things and figuring out new ways to do things drove you to try and see the world from another perspective, like
Yeah,
in terms of programming.
yeah,
We share that. I feel that I'm probably not smart enough for Haskell, and sometimes I even question if I'm smart enough to operate a microwave. You know, that says a lot about me, but not about Haskell. I tried that a couple of times, but I just can't deal with the overhead of the mental overhead and the mental gymnastics that you have to do in order to do something simple.
Oh, right.
For example, you have to, right off the bat, what is a monad?
Yeah.
Right off the bat, functors, monads,
Yep.
monoids,
Yep.
combinators,
Yep.
and these are not well, they're more common now, but they weren't common things, outside of academia or outside of people who were really interested in leveling on programming. For the run-of-the-mill programmer,
Yeah.
that was just hocus pocus.
Yeah, and to be honest, they're still not all that common,
Yeah, I mean, if it hadn't been for Scott Nimrod and him pushing me into functional, I wouldn't really have, cared to learn a lot of the terms. I knew what a monad was and, combinator, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I really didn't care for it because when it came to being productive, when it came to shipping software that made money, that wasn't really important because I leverage, years of experience to build robust software that could then go on and make money and, bring home the bacon. So
Right. Yeah.
it wasn't really important to me. It's not until this journey with Scott Nimrod a little bit before that I realized it. And this, I spent a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. I spent 2 years toying with Common Lisp, and
Oh, yeah.
I did not know. I learned all these things
Mm.
at the code level,
Mm.
but I didn't know, anything else. I know that you did this way, and I
Yeah.
copied the patterns, and I learned by reading a lot of code because back then that's all there was.
Yep.
There weren't tutorials. There wasn't no YouTube. None of that. And now that I'm back into functional and learning all these things, I'm like, This is Lisp. Like Lisp was already doing this. I was doing this with Lisp a long time ago, and this feels weird.
Yeah. What turned me on to Common Lisp was Peter Seibel's book, Practical Common Lisp.
Mm-hmm. So you've toyed with Lisp?
Yep. And
it blows your mind, right?
oh yeah. And it's funny when I was taking theory of programming languages in college, because I had studied the history and whatever of all these different languages, I was able to do really well on the exams.
Oh, wow!
And like the professor would tell stories, and because I knew all the history, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I remember. I know exactly where he's going with this." Everybody else was like, "What the?"
So that's a great point. Sometimes when we have this inner passion for something, be it programming, cars, whatever.
Yeah.
We're automatically ahead of the curve, and I feel that sometimes I feel like I'm cheating because it makes me feel like not that I'm better than others or that I'm above them, but it makes things so much simpler. Like you said, when people talk about something and I've already done it, I'm like, yep, that's really awesome, and I'm there. And I mean, I'm 38. I'm 38 years old. I wrote my first line of code when I was about 7 years old, and I haven't really stopped. So I have years upon years of frustration. to talk about. So, you mentioned being, focusing on ASP.NET.
Yep.
And for me, I'm also a web guy, API guy.
Yeah.
I moved away from the desktop years and years and years ago, and never looked back. So, how do there's this framework that we're using called Giraffe that builds on top of. It's a micro framework that uses, I think, ASP.NET Core. I don't know the full name under Core. Leverage those components to build a micro framework. How do you see now with open source you know, being sort of the main player in Microsoft agenda or playbook, how do you see ASP.NET working out and competing with this with all these other frameworks?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think because .NET is open source now, that they are able to iterate a lot faster than they used to, and they're able to integrate a lot more new stuff a lot faster than they ever had before.
Hmm.
Um,
So
and
you're saying that they can um, iterate and copy patterns from other frameworks that are also open source and integrate it into ASP.NET.
exactly, yeah. And they implemented OWIN for identity, identity management, and they implemented, they have their own web server now, and they have their own, like I said, they have their own web server that's different from IIS. They have all these, they built it from the ground up to be compatible with, dependency injection and solid and all these other kinds of different best practices that are natively supported now rather than having to depend on libraries or external things. Um, and I think because also with .NET Core specifically, like .NET Core is a lot smaller, and so they have less dependencies on older code than the full .NET framework does. So that's another reason why they're able to iterate as fast as they do.
Okay, that's wow. That's a great answer, by the way. You know, I hadn't thought of that. You know, they're having this integrated process where you're constantly feeding and
Yeah.
consuming.
Yes.
It does provide for better product for them, and I mean, I guess it also cuts their R&D
Yeah.
because you no longer are catching up 2 years later. You are constantly there, and you can also provide cutting edge solutions, and that's some synergy level marketing speak right there. I apologize.
Yeah.
Cutting edge there, so you can also like bleeding edge
Yeah.
technology to your enterprise customers. And I also see, so do you see .NET Core and all these frameworks around .NET Core, do you see them wandering into startup land?
I especially with .NET Core, I don't think it's impossible. It's not beyond the realm of possibility, especially because .NET Core is cross-platform, and it's built from the ground up to be cross-platform and to be modular and to be extensible, so you can add and customize so much more than you could have with older versions of ASP.NET that were very tied to older code.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely you are going to see a lot more adoption from startups, from small businesses, from not just traditional large enterprise customers.
mm-hmm. I mean, I asked that because I've been using Django for since forever,
Uh,
and for me, like Rails,
yeah,
it's one of those frameworks that allows you to just be productive yesterday. You don't need to
yeah,
write a database layer. You don't need to write authentication.
right.
Everything is built in, and you can just focus on building a product that makes money. Yes,
Yeah.
of course, you don't need that all the time, but for a big amount of projects, all you need is something like that. So
Right.
this is a follow-up question. So do you think that adding and this is something that I'm pondering myself to do, through the Lambda Cartel. Do you think that adding, a sort of standard set of components to core, to ASP.NET Core or to Giraffe or any framework, or publishing a library of sorts, do you think that adding those things will be a net benefit to the ecosystem?
Yeah, because I think if you have a standard, like if you have a standard base to build on, then you can structure your code around that. And, there's a lot that, especially ASP.NET Core, has out of the box that you don't necessarily have to, import a NuGet package or any kind of arcane wizardry. You just pass. You literally just pass an argument to a constructor, and it's available and done, and you don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah,
so I think that's a big deal, and I think if you are, regardless of whether you're building line of business apps or you're building, standard CRUD, some kind of CRUD interface, that the fact that you have these standard components is a big win, because, like I say, you can design your architecture around that, and you don't have to wonder, well, what am I going to use for XYZ? Because there's 100 different choices.
Exactly, that's a great point. One of the benefits of Django is that I don't need to hunt down a package and see if it's being maintained.
Yeah,
everything that comes within the Django framework, I know it's maintained, and I know it's going to be, if it's the long-term release, I know it's going to be maintained. And if I find a bug or I need something, I can just open an issue, make a pull request, and and just do that. So that's a great point, and that's, I think, something that's missing from .NET Core, the fact that there's still a lot of fragmentation.
Yeah, well, they're working on fixing that.
Yeah, but that's, I think, a secondary. That's just a secondary issue to everything else. Right. And I think we're doing a great job. So, do you think? And this is a question from left of field, right? So, do you think Microsoft is going to come out with a new language that to battle Kotlin and to battle Swift in the next couple of years?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't necessarily know. I don't necessarily think they're going to invent a whole separate language. But what I think they might do is make that sort of thing available to languages that they already support. So they might add C# or F# support for a thing like that, or even TypeScript. Who knows? But I don't think they would create a whole separate language just for doing Android, for example, or just for doing mobile, when we already have Xamarin, and we can already do 95% of what we would have done in a language like Kotlin with C# already as it is. So I think if anything, so like I said, I think if anything, they would enhance the languages that they already have to support that scenario rather than building something brand new from scratch.
So you mentioned Xamarin. I don't know if you have an experience with Xamarin. I've just looked at it. I haven't done anything.
Yeah, I've played with it a little bit, but I wouldn't call myself an expert.
Yeah, exactly. I've toyed with it. I looked at it. I read it, but for me, the fact that Microsoft doesn't really have a mobile platform of its own, it just says like, I don't need that, right?
Right.
Like I can do that with JavaScript and be done.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you see? So for me, it's really interesting, and I'm asking all these sort of questions because you are within this ecosystem. So you have a perspective that I don't, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm an outsider within .NET. I just arrived. You know, I used to be a .NET developer a long time ago. I spent some time doing .NET development professionally, but I got tired of it,
Yeah.
and I found a calling in other languages.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not like crapping on it, right? That's just for me. That was my journey, not necessarily the same as others. So how I'm just interested in your point of view. So uh, how do you see within all of this open source approach, all this MIT license code that they have,
Yeah,
VS
yeah.
Code, all those things? How do you see mobile working out? Like, because they
Well,
don't have a mobile platform
right.
and they don't want to adopt Android because they haven't said that, but that's how I read it. They don't want to support anything from Google.
Right.
How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think based on what I've seen coming out of things like the build and uh, the build conference that they have for developers and things like that. I think what they most try to do is build workflows for mobile platforms that already exist, um, rather than try to push something of their own. Because like I said, Windows Phone, isn't really a thing anymore.
Which
Uh,
is a pity. It was really good.
yeah,
I
yeah,
really like Windows phones. You know.
yeah. I mean, I probably would have bought a Windows Phone if they'd actually supported it for more than one or two releases. You know,
Yeah, I feel the same.
and it's funny because one of my ex bosses, she was like a diehard a Windows Phone user, and she wrote her own Windows Phone apps, and like
Wow,
that was her thing.
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
And it does bring into light that we as technology authors and creators, we really got to take into account the people who use it.
yeah,
I still have really old code on GitHub
uh,
that I haven't even looked at in easily more than a year and a half, but I still get emails, uh, from GitHub, of people asking questions.
uh,
And sure, yeah, I reply to the issues and I just tell them like, hey, fork it and do whatever you want. I'm not
yeah,
maintaining this anymore.
right,
But it's but we owe that to people, right? So
yeah, yeah, oh,
let's
yeah,
let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about, we talk about .NET, we talk about all these things, and your perspective has been enlightening, at least for this, for me, because
yeah,
I'm an outsider. So let's talk about your programming journey.
sure.
What's the worst bug you've ever encountered, and did you fix it, and how did you fix it?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
That's a nail biter.
Yeah, yeah. Um, one of the one of the most insidious that I can remember. Um, One of the most insidious that I can remember is we had a data driven one of the jobs I worked at. We had a data driven blog section for one of the websites that we were maintaining, and we had a terrible issue where not every blog post would always show up in the order that they were created in, or they wouldn't show up at all. So I had to do quite a bit of digging around SQL Server and digging around SQL Server logs. And digging around, IIS logs to try to figure out, okay, well, why isn't this rendering like it should? Um, and it took me like a week and a half to try to figure out you know, try to figure out what went wrong. And to be honest, I think it was just, I think it was just from what I remember, it was just a quirk in SQL Server and the way SQL Server interfaced with that version of ASP.NET, because I was able to do some poking around, and I was able to get it to work, but it was kind of one of those things where, like, okay, I fixed it, it works, but I'm still not sure why.
It's like when you smack your when you used to smack your TV and
Exactly.
the signal came back. Back when we didn't have flat panel TVs and and TVs, you used to just smack it and the signal came back, and I'm like, hey, I fixed it.
Yeah.
or blowing your NES cartridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Those are the worst ones, because you don't know what fixed it.
Yeah.
Well, you know what fixed it, but you're not entirely sure, and they haunt you.
Right. Yeah. That was the biggest example that came to mind right off the top of my head.
Has it ever happened to you that you're driving or you're walking around and suddenly you start thinking about that? You're like, oh, I wish I could fix it, or I wish I knew what was the solution, or does that ever happen to you? Like,
well, not yeah. In general, yes, because it's kind of human nature to be haunted by your mistakes.
Yeah,
and
that's
to
true.
be haunted by the things that you either didn't do or didn't do as well as you could have.
Mm-hmm.
Like if only I could go back and if only I knew then what I know now. I think that's pretty common, regardless of if you work in tech or not.
That's true. I have, aside from being a programmer, I'm also a mechanic. I became a master mechanic.
Oh, nice.
Some decades ago, I think. And I still think back about those cars that I couldn't really solve the problem, and I had to refer the customers to somebody else, because you try to troubleshoot something, but it's outside of your experience or expertise, and you just simply have to refer it. Just like when you encounter a bug and you can fix it, you gotta ask somebody else for help.
Yeah.
Right. That's the same thing. So what's next for John Best? What is that next challenge or that next mountain that you want to conquer?
Well, I think in terms of professionally, I definitely want to do more with open source. I've been dipping my toes into it recently, but I definitely want to do more with it. I definitely want to be more of a designer, where I build something from scratch and build a design, build an architecture from scratch, rather than only being a maintenance developer.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to continue to grow my skills as far as being full stack. I want to get better with SQL Server. I want to get better with JavaScript. I want to get better in just software engineering in general, because it's it's called engineering for a reason. And I think it's the more I can learn from others, the better off I'll be. If it goes back to the old Isaac Newton quote. If I see, it is only because I stand on the shoulders of giants.
That's true. That's
You
true.
know?
I, I can share that feeling because I was thinking the other day and actually tweeted about it. Like, if it weren't for open source, I would not be a programmer. I got a C64. Yes, when I was a kid, I was really, really, really lucky. Believe me, I was like in Puerto Rico in 1986 to get a computer in your home. That's just it. It's like having, I don't know. It's like running and finding $1,000,000.
Yeah.
That's it.
Or,
That's how
or
crazy.
yeah, or owning a Rolls Royce or something.
Exactly, like, or winning the birth lottery. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I won the birth lottery with my parents. I didn't win it, by being born in Puerto Rico. Not that I hate the island or anything, right? But let me be clear. But I
Yeah.
won it with my parents. I won it with my family. And if it hadn't been for open source, if it hadn't been for Linux, if it hadn't been for the works of RMS of Rachel Stallman, and the new project and all those things, I wouldn't be where I stand. And certainly Microsoft really didn't make it easy for you to program back then.
Right.
And neither did Oracle or any of these big companies, because if you wanted to play with Visual Studio Express was not a thing.
Yeah. Yep.
And Oracle had, I believe, Delphi.
Yep.
No, Oracle had NetBeans, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And that was not a thing. And Delphi was out there, which was like Pascal with a tie.
Yeah, and that was very much a Borland thing.
Yes, but it wasn't free. So if it hadn't been for open source, for Python, for Lisp, for all these languages, I would be, I I was gonna say I would have been a worse programmer than I am now, but I don't think it's possible for me to be any worse than I am right. Oh my God! So we have about 10 minutes left to go, and John, you mentioned talking about wanting to dive more into open source.
Yeah.
And I'm going to openly and personally, invite you to, open a project and, just look at what we're doing at the Lambda Cartel.
Okay.
Look at the things that we're doing. I know that you forked Nikeza.
Yeah.
I think you were the first person outside of us to fork Nikeza, and I was pretty pumped. I'm like, finally, there's some life out there.
Right. Yeah.
Just don't look at the code I wrote. So, what I would like, I would love to collaborate with you. And I know that your strong suit right now is C#. Yeah. And I know that Scott Nemrod, so Scott Nimrod, I want to make this comment the right way. So Scott Nimrod is a big proponent for F# because it makes the correct assumptions. Like he says, this is built in a way that correctness is the priority. Yeah. And I don't want to put words into his mouth, but from what I've heard, his criticism of C# is that, although it has a compiler, although it has all those things, it's not as strong when it comes to types as F#, right? Yeah. So, but I still want to have somebody that's outside of this functional bubble come in and build something. And so if
I'll be happy to come in with a needle and go pop.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're, and I'm gonna take another, of Scott's sayings. If you're not destroying your belief system constantly, if you're not rebuilding that belief system, if you're not challenging,
Yeah.
your limits, if you're not pushing yourself to the limit, then you're not really growing, and that's
Yeah.
true. So
Yeah. It's
I want to see a C# project from you. You're welcome to do it.
yeah.
And let's start really small, really minuscule,
Mhm.
and let's see where that goes. So
Okay.
the invitation is out there, and you know and so last question.
All right.
You've been a supporter of the Lambda Cartel pretty much since we started,
Yeah.
mostly because you follow on Twitter, on social media.
Yep.
I think most of the members, if not all.
Yeah.
So what do you think about it so far? Like, what's your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I think you guys are really onto something. I think you guys are definitely on the right track uh, when it comes to talking about software, when it comes to talking about functional programming, when it comes to talking about open source, when it comes to uh, building tools and building systems from lots of different components, rather than just saying, "Oh, well, we're only going to be tied to this ecosystem, or we're only going to be using this," or because yeah, you use F sharp, but you also use Python, you also use PowerShell, you also use Docker
We
and all these other things.
Yeah, we
So
use Elm,
yep,
and I know that the recent, the JavaScript, dialect. I think it made its way into the Kesa code base somehow. Somebody
yeah,
let it in. I don't know who it was, but I'm looking for him.
yeah.
So I appreciate those words because, well, when we started, I immediately understood that the Lambda Cartel, aside from being a group of nerds building software, because that's what we are. Let's not kid ourselves,
Right.
Um, aside from being a group of professional developers building software together and open sourcing it, I knew that this was a platform that we could use to not only talk about our experiences and document, our process and all that, but to also bring some light into the actual development process
Yeah.
outside of the whole agile bubble and
Yeah.
Scrum ecosystem, which I hate it. I don't hate agile and Scrum. I just hate my experiences with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's easy. It's easy to do. It's easy to do poorly and hard to do well.
exactly, it's easy to be so bad at agile that
I mean,
it sucks.
the ideas themselves are sound, but they take a lot of effort when it comes to being able to execute them well.
Yes, it's like I tell my wife, like, the idea of dating me wasn't that bad. It's not until you actually dated me that you make the error. The ideas, right? So we have this saying that from imagination to implementation,
Yeah.
right? So we imagine these things, and Nikeza itself has been a journey worth 1,000 books.
Yeah.
When we ship out 1.0, when that comes out, I'm going to just share with everybody the process, and we're gonna do, we're gonna look back and talk about all the mistakes
Yep.
and all the errors, not because we want to, like, vent,
Right.
but because we want people to get more out of that.
Yeah.
And to say, this guys did that, and these are the signals that they were seeing at that specific moment. So,
Yeah.
and Nikeza, let me tell you, that's
Also related to that. I've seen a lot of developers live streaming their coding on Twitch.
we're mostly on YouTube.
Yeah.
And Scott Nimrod and Odie tries I know that Mitchell Tilbrook, who is another dev, he also does that. I don't know if Adam Wright has done it, but I know Adam. So Adam Wright, one of the members, he has this project called F# for C# developers. I don't know if you know about that.
I did not, but I talked to Adam.
You have to check it out.
I was gonna say I talked to Adam a lot, so I should know about that. Damn.
Oh my God, it's a really great website. It's something that I've been pushing him to continue doing, because I think it's necessary, right, to have like that perspective, and when going from F#, from F# to from C# to F#. And but the Lambda Cartel, I appreciate all the nice words. It's one of the reasons we do it. It's one of the reasons that.
Well, yeah, and you guys are really good at at cannibalizing the best parts of lots of different things and making and making the sum of all of that even better than their individual parts.
I'm the jury's still on that one.
well, based on what I can see, I'll stand by that statement.
It's been a journey, and we have Nikesa that we started doing together, and because life gets in the way, some people focus more on it, for a period, and they pull back, and some other people do it. But the big proponent, like the big driving force behind Nikesa, has been Scott Nimrod. And the guy's just amazing to look at. Like, you just shut up and just read his code. Like, it's like seeing, it's just like watching, the Bob Ross show. You see a canvas, and he just puts some colors. Like he's gonna mess up the painting, and suddenly you have a really nice portrait of the beach. Right? And I think like Scott Nimrod is the Bob Ross of code. And I don't know if he's gonna like that that comparison, but he's just like that. It's just amazing. Like I read the Nikesa code every day and see like what people are committing. I just learn from that. And there's so many libraries that are gonna come out of that code base that it's crazy. So we have a minute to go. John, this has been a really great episode. This new format that we're trying out, I'm glad that I think it was the best decision to have you be the first guest. I always enjoy talking with you on Twitter and interacting and all this, and we certainly have one of the best GIF threads ever.
Right.
And I have to say,
I think Adam especially is in awe of both of us.
Yeah. and it's gonna sound like like a bromance here. But I gotta say, you're 27 now, like you said.
Yep.
I definitely expect a lot of great things from you when it comes to code, to open source, because you have this amazing approach to life and this amazing approach, and this amazing attitude towards things, and it just, I expect so many great things, and I feel blessed that you are part of this journey. And so, with that in mind, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Yeah.
And I want to tell everybody out there, if you're listening to this podcast, let me just ask you why. And no, I'm sorry, bad joke. So if you're listening to this podcast, let me tell you that John Best is not only a really great programmer and someone that we that is in love with programming and computers, but it's also someone that you should reach out and meet on social media, and someone that you should definitely consider working with, because John is just a pleasure to talk with and to be with. So John, I know that you're that you're not, that's not something that you asked me to say,
No, I did
but
not.
I wanted to put it out there because I like to build people up, right?
Yeah.
I don't like to destroy people. I like to build people.
Right.
So with this in mind, I have to say this. I say this on every episode that this was the best show ever,
Yeah.
and I think it's actually one of the best shows ever.
Yeah, and not just because I'm
So
here.
I think it was because you were here. So let's do some A/B testing for the next show. Let's have you as the host. Somebody else. Let's remove me from the equation. All right. So thank you so much, John. I
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you very
it.
much. Very much.
Do you
Yeah, it
have
was
anything to say before we go?
I would just like to say that if you are new to your own programming journey, whatever you do, keep going because it's so worth it, and there are so many people who would love to help you and to help you be better than you are, then better than you ever thought you could be. So if you're, whether you're just starting or you've been in the game for a while, always keep striving to move forward. And I guarantee you, there are people that are available to help you, regardless of what stage you're in on your journey. So,
Wow.
you know,
I could have. I aspire to someday statement like that one because I let's just end the show with that. So thank you everybody for listening to the Lambda Cartel podcast. This has been John Bast and Pablo Rivera as your host. Thank you so much and take care. Bye bye.
Yep. Take care.